Python Flask application designed for the COVID-19 data presentation. This app is developed by Rishabh Lala as a part of assignment 3 for distributed systems class with the help of Professor Clinton Daniels' guidance at the University of South Florida. This project showcases the implementation of a full stack application using Flask, SQLite3, and front end technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Bootstrap, and JSON Data parsing. So, what you see on my screen is the website that I have created. So I have 4 tabs in the navigation bar. First one is home, second is COVID-19 data, about me, and a new patient information. This website is focused on COVID-19 visualization from 2020 through 2023. Here's the visualization. What you're going to see on the screen is the chart of case count, hospitalization count, and the death count. And we go back to the home screen, and if we want to add the new patient information, which this assignment is really focused on, we click here, and what we see is the new patient information form. Let's just try to first use this form, and then we can dive into the Python aspect or the coding aspect of this and how this form is really working. Let me put the name of my wife, Priyanka, and put Gandhi, her last name, and I'll just put our address. That's 204 East South Street, and the city is Orlando, and Orlando in the state of Florida, and the zip is 32801. And let's assume we were hospitalized, or we could be just dead. Let's just assume for the sake of this app's functionality, let's assume we were dead because of COVID. And I'll just go ahead and submit this data. Record successfully added to the database. Now we want to verify whether it was successfully really added or not. I'll just go ahead and click on review or edit students. Here it says students because it's been borrowed from Professor Clinton Daniels' coding files. But I'll just go ahead and click here, and I see the 8th database here. That's Priyanka Gandhi, 204 East South Street, Orlando, Florida, and the cause or the case type is dead. Let me test the functionality of edit button and see what really happens here. If I were to change the zip code from 32801 to 32810, and I change the city from Orlando, Florida to say Atlanta, and I say Georgia, and from street to I'll just change avenue. From Priyanka Gandhi, I'll just remove the Gandhi out of it. I'll just go ahead and submit the updates here, and let's check out how the updates are really looking. So I have avenue here, I have Atlanta, Georgia, 32810, and the case type didn't change, it's still the death. Let's say if I were to delete a record from the database, then let's say I want to delete the record number 4, that's Aman Sharma, that's living at 100 Chanakyapuri, Bhopal, India. The case type was hospitalization. I were to delete this guy, and I say okay, and it's been deleted. So remember, it was number 4, and now you don't see number 4 here in the database. And I want to check out in the database or DB file whether it's really reflecting what we see on the screen on the right. I'll just go ahead and click on SQLite server, and let's check out. I don't have the number 4 guy. So let's see. I have Priyanka, and John Kennedy. Priyanka, and John Kennedy. Here, the sequence is not this sequence. So I have 6 counts on this screen. Record number 1 has been deleted. Record number 4 has been deleted. What we have here is the total number of 6 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's what we have. Let's try to see how this app is really working in the app.py. So what we see here in this part of the code that begins from this comment and goes up to here. So what am I really doing here is my aim is to create, read, update, and delete, which is also known as the CRUD operations on the COVID-19 patient data. And the first part of this code really is the Flask. Flask is to create the instance of the web application. And I'm using the render template. I'm importing that part, the render template here, to render the HTML templates or the HTML files that I have created on this left. So you see the template here and you see all those HTML files here. And I'm using the render template functionality of Python Flask. And this actually renders those HTML files. And the third part is the request. To access the data sent by the users through HTTP requests, I'm using this functionality called request. And lastly, I'm using the SQLite3 to interact with SQLite databases, which we just looked at in the database or DB file. First thing I do is the initializing the Flask app. App equals to Flask name, creates an instance of the Flask class. Then I go ahead and define the home page route. That's app.route. Within quotes, I have a backslash, which directs to the home page by rendering the index.html file. And then I have some additional routes. First one is the route for the COVID-19 data homepage. So what we see here is COVID data and COVID data.html. This is a function definition, COVID data within parentheses open and close. And then I render COVID data.html, which takes me to COVID data.html file in the templates. And similarly, I do the same operation for about me, and I do the same operation for index.html for referencing it on other pages of the website. Now let's talk about the home page for a little bit. The home page, which in my case is actually the index.html. Here's my home page that you see on the screen. I a little bit talk about the visualization, how it's been made, and I'm using the chart.js website to create the JavaScript, or with the help of JavaScript, I'm rendering this COVID-19 data. And this has been covered as part of assignment 2. And I'm using some CSS, the site.css. Also, this navigation strip is coming with the help of the Bootstrap coding, so which is what I'm referring in the href here. The style sheet is the actual Bootstrap min.css file, which is an online CSS file. I like this navigation bar, so I wanted to borrow this with the help of Bootstrap. And I have this little PNG for the University of South Florida, which I unfortunately didn't change the name, which is still being called as puppy.png from assignment 2. But the intention is to show this image to make it look more official. Now let's go back and dive into the real crux of this assignment. That's the form page, or the app.py functionality, which is actually based on the create or insert data. Then I have edit data section for this, and then so here's the edit data section, and then I have the section for deleting the data. So this part or this block of the code helps me delete the data from this functionality we already tested a few seconds ago. So let's look at how these functionalities or how these blocks of code really work. So what I have here is, let me select part of the code that I'm really going to talk about. So to begin with, there are three commands this piece or this block of code really has. The first one is try, then exception handling, except, and finally, whatever happens above, the code still has to close that chunk of the code and render the template result.html with the message, whether it was successfully completed or whether it had an error in it. So either case, whether error or successful completion, you're going to see the message equals to message. The template render template is using the result.html page, the result.html, and the message that goes in that page or that gets displayed on that page is the message from above here, this part of the code. So this request.form, this piece of the code, request.form, extracts the data from the form fields. Then it goes ahead and executes a SQL insert query to add data to the database. So I have SQL commands here, insert into students. Students is the name of my table, and it takes in the data that is name, ADDR, city, zip, and the case type. Case type is something that I added onto Professor Clennan's files. So what I have here is request.form and case type goes in another case type variable. So that's how the variable gets defined, and all these values um, that the SQL command takes, it gets put in to this table in the columns called nm, ADDR, city, zip, and case type columns. So that's how we update the record. And similarly, in a very similar fashion, I have the ability to edit the record. In the edit section, I still use the post method. In a second, I'm going to talk about what's the difference between post and get, but I have a similar functionality here. Try, accept, and finally, I do the same thing, render the template, edit.html in the finally block of the code, and I have, based on the ID, I edit the database in the database.db file. Here, this connection that the SQLite.connect database.db goes in connect variable, and the ID gets updated when we click on the edit. So the functionality cur.execute, cur.execute is the select statement, the select SQL statement, select row ID, which from students. So it's like select star from students at the table name, where row ID equals to what we give in the ID, what this code has requested from the ID section when we have that database table that we want to edit. So, and the delete part of the code does the similar operation and helps us to delete a SQL database with the help of a SQL command. So what you see on the screen is the delete operation, and delete students from where the row ID is the row ID, and the row ID is captured just above here in the form of ID that we provide, and ID goes in the row ID variable, which gets deleted. So the message that you give once the record is deleted is record successfully deleted from the database. So this con.commit actually just makes it possible to allow the SQL commands to execute or per.execute, I'm sorry, allows us to execute the SQL commands, delete from students is the table name, where row ID is, whereas again, the SQLite command that allows us to delete something from the database. So we understand few items like render template, which allows us to render the template, the HTML template. We use the try and except block to handle any exceptions during the database operations. And if there is any exception, this rolls back the transaction if error occurs to maintain the data integrity. And finally, block closes the database connection once the operation is completed. Let's a little bit talk more on the insert operation. So I have request method defined as post. This actually checks if the request method is post or if it's get. So here there are two options, post or get, but here I define the, if it's a post, then you're going to do this. You're going to try, check any exceptions, and finally do this part of the code. So NM is the name of the student, ADDR is the address of the student. Here I use the word student because it's originally defined for the student database, but I'm using, on my app, I'm using it as the address of the COVID patient, city of the COVID patient, zip code of the COVID patient, or the case type. Now, lastly, the case type of the COVID-19 patient, whether it's a death, whether it's a hospitalization, or if it's COVID, just a COVID positive case which has not been hospitalized. So simply I'm executing the SQL query and the transaction is being handled in this block of the code: app, route, post, and get operations, and finally the code gets executed. The difference between the post and get methods, let's talk a little bit about this. The two most commonly used HTTP request method is fundamental in web development and plays a crucial role in how the data is transmitted and handled on the web. The purpose of the get method is primarily to retrieve the data. It requests the data from specified resource. It's suitable for simple and non-secure data retrieval operations like search queries or viewing a web page. It's less secure and it's not suitable for sensitive information like passwords or whatnot. That's why we don't use the get method, because you're going to see the details in the URL, whereas in the post method, you don't see the details in the URL. What you see is just the text of that page in the URL. So in the post method, it's again a way to send the data to the server and create or update a resource. It's not visible in the URL, and you can send large amounts of data because it's not included in but because it's included in the body. It's more secure, obviously, because you don't see the data in the URL, and sensitive information like passwords can be transmitted with the help of the post method. So now we have talked about the difference between the post and get method. Now we can go a little bit in the index.html page. Here, index.html, which shows up here, I defined the web page with the help of my Bootstrap styling script. Here's my Bootstrap styling script. And these colors that you see on the screen, the navigation bar, this little piece that's grayed out, and these fonts are with the help of blessings from the Bootstrap. Then I have the image URL that's coming up from the static. Static is a folder in my directory. So I have this puppy.png. Forgive me for the puppy.png name, but it's actually the logo of the USF. On the new patient, you see at the bottom that's little USF symbol, which here is named as logo.png. So if you look at the students.html page, the bottom I have the end block. End block contains the reference to this PNG, the logo.png, and it's actually this end block is defined in the layout.html file. So here you see the end block or the footer. So footer URL static. So URL for static, which references this folder static here on the left, and the file name logo.png, which is this guy, which is this logo. So this shows up in the footer. So when we say the footer, it's actually a line at the bottom of the page, and you see whatever you define in the footer at the bottom of the page. There are a few other things that's being called out in different parts of the HTML codes. So these are little blocks. So here we define the percentage, end block percentage, and this is my footer, which gets defined here. So that's my footer, and I have a body, and this little piece of code in the layout.html is my navigation bar. So this black or dark navigation bar that you see has 4 buttons that take us to different locations on the website. It gets defined once because I'm defining it only in the layout.html file, and I get to use it as many times as I want on different pages. I don't have to define it multiple times. So this navigation bar in the div class is navigation bar expand LG is for large, nav bar dark, BG dark. So this is a class in the Bootstrap. The Bootstrap file that I referenced in my code. So I've defined a class container fluid, which allows me to put these buttons in a little bit fluid manner. Otherwise, if I did not define this as fluid, these guys were not equally spaced, especially when the screen size got changed. They got mixed and matched or up and down, one below another, when this was not defined as fluid. So I chose this functionality. So text color white is for these text, and I'm overriding this part of the information, which I call as home. Then I have other buttons like COVID-19 data defined up in the second line here, COVID-19 data. Then I have about me. Then I have new patient. Then lastly I have review and edit student information, which is this guy, review and edit students. So let's check out the review and edit students. And we already looked at the functionality of this guy. I'm able to edit, delete. Let's see if I'm able to delete the last record. It gets deleted, and the number 8 row is gone, which gets done with the help of the delete section of this code, which is the last section of this code. Let's check out the table.py file, where the table gets defined. So here I'm importing SQLite3. There's a connection that gets established with the database in the con variable. Then I just say connect to the database successfully. Then it gets successfully connected. That will show up in the terminal. And this connection.execute allows me to use the SQLite or the SQL commands, so to say, like drop table students. So every time I just run this whole thing, I like to clean this up because these rows every time just got too many, and I wanted to have it cleaned up. So I added this line here: con execute drop table students. Students is the name of the table. Then I have con execute create table students, name, text, address. What I added up here in Professor Daniel's files was case type, text. The case type, this column up here, is something that I added new. So, and it just shows up here. The database gets updated successfully when this gets created. And then I close this connection. So that's how the connection gets established. So I think we covered the static part, the templates, how these templates are working. And what I didn't show here is how the About Me page looks. Here's a little bit of information about me as I changed my field from, I haven't changed it yet, but I am a structural engineer currently trying to pursue IT and business, which is what my interest is. And I'm trying to get into this field of IT and business. That's the story I've explained up here. So the key aspect of this part of the code, if I were to open the About Me page, where is that? All right, About Me. So here's a big paragraph. The way I got this to work was using BR multiple times to go to show up these spaces, and then I use the bold statement up here to make this part as bold, to make it look nicer. Another key aspect is this data is defined in the form of a table. So th is the table header, so which is what this is, my name. This part is Rishabh is in the first cell of is actually the table header. Rishabh and Lala goes in the second cell of this table, which is the heading for the second row. So this table has actually three columns. The first column heading is Rishabh, second column heading is Lala, that's my last name, and the third column heading has nothing, which is what we see here, that's a blank. And TD is the table data. This is the table data. You don't see anything in the first column. You don't see anything in the second column. That's this guy. And what you see is the information contained in the third column of this table, which is what this is, which is what we see here defined. What this Google Chrome is doing is allowing me to show up the information which is contained in which is defined in the HTML or CSS or JavaScript language. The only functionality that I haven't shown up here or discussed about until now is how this app really gets started, or how we stop this app to work. I just press Control-C up here in the terminal that created or stopped this app. Now, if I'm going to click any button on here, it's not going to work because the app is already stopped. So you see here that this site can't be reached, and this is not going to work. So what I'm going to do is restart the app. So Python and Flask run. So the app is going to restart, running on 127.0.0.1.5000. I just click here. Here's a new instance of the app that gets running, up and running, and I can check out the information on the new student page. I can add things around up here. So that's how I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And that brings me to the end of my presentation on assignment 3. I think I covered homepage. I covered what I have in the COVID-19 data. And this is what I submitted in the assignment 2. And I've covered the About Me page. And clearly, I think I've demonstrated how this form gets defined, how we are able to edit it with the help of app.py. We are able to insert the data in the app.py. We are able to, I have this little new functionality defined up here as case type. Case type gets defined in student.html where the table is. This little piece of information which I added to this table is case type, which was in the original files provided by Professor Clinton Daniel. So select name, case type, and then I have 3 options that I give the user to choose from: is hospitalization, death, and or if your COVID of the person is that you are entering the data for has been COVID positive and not been hospitalized. So hospitalization, death, and COVID positive, and then there's a little submit button that you see at the bottom, which submits this information. That's how the table gets defined, or this form gets defined in student.html. Form action URL for addrec, and the method again is the post. I already covered what's the difference between post and get. And I have this input type text for most of these items, except for this little big guy, which is the address, which is text area. So other guys are just text fields, and this is an option. So hospitalization is an option, death is an option. Option is just like and something equivalent to a drop down, which is what we would call it in regular daily language. And then I have the submit button and app.py with the help of all these other files takes care of the rest of the story, taking this data, picking up the data that's been submitted and taking it to the database and allowing me to edit the database. So if I were to change anything in the database, I have the edit tool, I have the delete option. And if I close my instance of the virtual environment, this part of the code contained in create table.py will get updated, and this table will get clean because I have this con execute drop table students defined, which will clean up this table every time I would start the new environment. There's another page I think I want to cover here is the list.html. So in the form that we looked at, so in the new patient form, I have, so here I define how the table is going to look in my database. In the student.html, here's how the form is going to display on the screen. In the list.html, I define how this is really going to look in my database.db file, which is what the SQL viewer will allow me to see. So sometimes in the beginning, I made this mistake of case type. I did not define in the list.html, but I define in the student.html, which is what my table up here is, so things have to kind of line up to be able to execute the code successfully in the app.py. So list.html will create the required fields in the database table, which is what you see up here. So these are the table definitions, or the table data, the student ID, name, address, city, zip, case type. So these headings you would see up here in the SQLite viewer, name, address, city, zip, case type. So these guys are coming from the list.html. And the border has a certain thickness. If I make this border something different, you would see slightly different border in the database.db. So that's it for now. I hope you learned something, or I was able to explain what I have done in my presentation or in my website. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I wish all of you a wonderful day. Again, that's Rishabh. This is part of assignment 3 submission. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.